So there I would say an atheist, just if I'm talking with someone, and I think most atheists would agree with this, they would say, look, I don't believe in God because I don't see any good reasons to think God exists. Okay, then it sounds like what you're looking for are good reasons. And so here, we've talked about the arguments for contingency and kalam, but I think that sometimes, our listeners to this may say, well, I don't know those arguments under my fingertips. What am I supposed to do in these circumstances? I would ask questions.
Yeah.
And so one question I would ask here is, okay, so why should I believe there are no good reasons to believe in God? Well, you prove it to me. Well, I've heard the different reasons, and I have a different reasons to believe in God that may not be a good reason to you, but there's lots of different reasons. Can you help me see why should I believe there are no good reasons? Why should I?
Another question I've heard you ask, and you might be getting to this, is, and I think this is an excellent question, they'll say, I don't believe in God because I've never encountered any good arguments for God's existence. And you say, okay, well, there's a lot of arguments for God's existence. Which do you think is the best one? Obviously, you think it still fails, but out of all of the arguments you've clearly assessed, which is the best one and why does it fail?
That one meets with a fair amount. It depends on who I'm talking to.
That's a good question.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But it's a good question, and it may not work well, but the point is it often exposes that the atheist really hasn't, I mean, not always, but I think there are many atheists who really haven't looked into arguments for God's existence, and their response to that question
there's
proves
few that will tell me because I could answer it in reverse to them. I would say the strongest argument against God is the problem of evil.
Yeah,
but here's why I don't find it to be compelling. Here's why I don't find it ultimately compelling to me. I've had atheists when I've put it forward, I've heard say there is no best argument. They're all bad. I'm like, well,
give me one of the better ones.
Yeah, they're all equally terrible. I mean, that doesn't seem right. Most philosophical positions that people hold, there can be better or worse arguments. There are better and worse arguments for atheism. The problem of evil is better than my priest was mean to me when I was 5, or I had religious parents that never let me go out with my friends. One of those is going to be better than the other. So sometimes I'll try very hard with this. I'll say, well, what's the least bad argument you've come across? So sometimes I'll phrase that, what's the least bad one?
Now, when I've heard you do this on Catholic Answers Live, though, I've never heard a compelling response. I've just heard something that exposes them. And again, I'm not saying this of all atheists. There are obviously very intelligent atheists who are seeking the truth, I think.
Yeah, and I think we don't want to have these questions as like gotcha moments. It's more like, help me understand. Like, in order to say there's no good reasons to believe in something, you could either have not looked at the reasons, and hence you haven't found any, or you've looked at the reasons and found them wanting. Now, a retort to me might be, well, what's the best reason to believe in Bigfoot? Yeah, and I think there's this idea that something, if something is, what they'll say is, I think, and I always want to get inside people's heads. So one thing, I think, honestly, Matt, I think many people are atheists because they think that if there were good reasons, they would be universally believed. And like all the smartest scientists in the world, and we would all accept this, and that we would agree. But that's just not how it works with philosophical topics. People disagree, like
life.
Well, or like, let's take ethics. Moral philosophers disagree about whether we should follow Kant or be utilitarians or virtue theorists. Even atheistic philosophers disagree about very important ethical truths. There's no scientific way to resolve that. Daniel Dennett and Sam Harris disagree about whether free will and determinism are compatible. And there's no scientific way to resolve their dispute. Philosophical questions, by their nature, you're going to have disputes where you can't get a majority on it because the question is so pointed. Now, when it comes to asking people about, those, what is the best or least bad argument, like the retort will be, let's say the Bigfoot example. And what I would say here is, well, I think the best reason to believe in Bigfoot might be personal sightings people have claimed to have, and what's it called, Robertson, the Patterson film. There's this footage of this appears to be a humanoid creature that looks like Bigfoot walking, and people have analyzed it. So I would say, well, I would think that's the best reason for, but ultimately...
The difference is you're not the one claiming that there are no good arguments for Bigfoot, whereas they are claiming there are no good arguments for theism.
And so what they would say is that just as we casually dismiss Bigfoot, we should just casually dismiss God. Like most people don't sit around really thinking this through.
Sure.
And so my reply to that would be, well, I think most people take for granted that they believe things about the world based on scientific consensus, and they don't figure this out for themselves. Like if I asked most people to prove E equals MC squared, 900, less than 0.001% could do it. Maybe a theoretical physicist could prove E equals MC squared.
Okay.
But most people accept it because they saw Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about it, and he's just hilarious and interesting, or whatever. Or Sean Carroll, you know, it's in my science textbook, and it's consensus, and we follow that. And so I think sometimes when atheists put forward it's an argument from cryptids, you don't believe in dragons, you don't believe in Bigfoot, you don't believe in Loch Ness Monster. Well, I think that's because you haven't looked at these arguments yourself either, and you should do the same with God.
Unless you're Jimmy Aiken.
And Jimmy has.
You have absolutely looked
and I've looked at it as well, because I want to believe, I want to have an open mind. It's possible there, you know, how you believe in Bigfoot. Well,
there's a lot of forest out there in Wyoming.
Right, and there's also, there's people who said there weren't black swans, and you're from Australia.
Yes, right. Those are the first ones I saw, actually.
I met someone when I was there, and people thought for a long time there were no black swans. People told me, but I would say, well, so those are the best reasons for. But I would say they're counterbalanced by reasons against. Like if there were this population of hominids in this particular region, we would expect to find carcasses, droppings, more sightings, because we do not find these empirical observations for unicorns or Bigfoot or Loch Ness or whatever, then I think it's safe to agree with the scientific. Most people will follow the consensus among zoologists about saying these creatures do not exist. But the existence of God is not like the existence of cryptids, which are disputed animals. God is not something is not a being in the universe that you try to find. There's no field of science dedicated to determining whether God exists. It's a philosophical
Explain
question.
Why for people. Why is this not a scientific question exactly?
I would say it's because science is devoted to finding natural causes and explanations for things we observe in the physical universe. So science is committed to understanding physical and observable phenomena in the universe, and science explains things according to regular laws of nature that are applied. So science is good at finding basically material things, or at least things that constitute the material universe. But when we're talking about whether certain immaterial things exist, there's no scientific test. And it's not just God. I mean, do other minds exist?
Yeah.
Free will? Numbers,
moral facts.
Mathematicians dispute whether numbers are real. Some are Platonists, think numbers really do exist because math is universal and you can't change it.
Yeah.
You know, every culture on Earth does not have a story of Batman, but every culture on Earth has 2 + 2 = 4. It's not a truth we invented; it's a truth we discovered. But if we discovered it, where is it?
Yes.
Hey, if you enjoyed that clip, you will absolutely love the full interview, so click right there to enjoy the whole thing. Also, a big thanks to these groups who made that interview possible. Learn more in the show notes below about these guys. They're absolutely incredible and honored to have them as sponsors. Oh, and also, if you haven't subscribed yet, click subscribe and then that bell button. That way YouTube will be forced to let you know when we put out more content.